Adam Conover, you created the and star in the series Adam Ruins Everything on True TV, and it's based on a college humor web series of shorter online videos. But where did the original inspiration for this kind of informational comedy series come from in the first place?
Well, I've always been a sort of an information sponge my whole life. I come from a family of academics. I'm actually the only member of my family who doesn't have a PhD. I'm the loser who dropped out with a bachelor's. But when I was in college, I wanted to go to grad school in philosophy, but I couldn't hack it. I went into comedy instead. But I sort of retain that love of like learning and finding new knowledge, So I'm the type of person who, I've read every issue of the New Yorker for the last 15 years. I listen to podcasts and audiobooks in my car, not music, stuff like that. I was also, the kind of person who would like bug people at parties, any topic of conversation. Oh, I think I read an article about that, a decade ago by, I don't remember who, but the funny thing about that is, et cetera. And I always sort of pegged that as something that, annoyed people about me. When I started combining that with comedy, I noticed that, something really interesting happened. The first bit I did that with was our original short about diamond engagement rings, the history of diamond engagement rings. I did that, I started doing that on stage as part of my stand-up act. And when I did that, I noticed people sort of started, leaning forward and going like, they weren't just laughing, they were going like, oh, really? What's going on with that? That's crazy. And it really stuck with them. They would come back to me and, at the next show and be like, oh, I looked that up. That's nuts. And so, we did it. I eventually wrote a college humor sketch around it where I wrote the other writers in to the sketch making fun of me because I was worried they were going to make fun of me in the writer's room for going on and on for writing this pedantic sketch about, about all the stuff I know. So I wrote them in going, oh, you think you're so smart. Little did I know that would be the comedic engine for the whole series, Then we just sort of pitched it around. That's sort of where it came from.
And this central character that you play, this version of yourself that is that kind of know-it-all who tells people the truth they don't want to hear.
That it's a character that a lot of people think it's literally me. It's slightly off. It's sort of about as close as Larry David is to Larry David, But yeah.
I was about to ask, like, since you are an information sponge and you do go to people at parties and tell them things, talk to them about these kinds of subjects. How close is it to you, and how much of an exaggeration is it?
Well, I would say in a lot of ways the character is based on a younger version of myself, like the way that other people treat the character and the way that the character feels, where he's sort of constantly he wants to be liked very badly and he gives people information compulsively because he thinks it'll make them like them, but it always sort of pushes them away. And it's sort of this struggle for friendship, right? He's like, oh, I wish I had friends, That's how I felt when I was younger. That's how I felt when I was in high school and college, the character being lonely. I felt very lonely when I was younger. Now I'm actually a lot more socially well-adjusted than I used to be, and I do have friends and I am in a happy relationship and that kind of thing. But, that emotional core is still there. So, I would say comedically, it's sort of based on a younger version of myself. As far as like the literal details of the character's life, we like to slip in some things. We like to sort of change it up. So some facts are real and some are not. Actually, this confuses people a lot. It is my real parents on the show that we've brought on, but my sister is played by a really funny comedian named Rhea, who is, on the show, she's a public defender. In real life, my sister is a science journalist and who lives in DC. So because we wanted to tell a fictional story about Adam's relationship with his family, which, resembles my relationship with my own family. It's the same themes, the same sort of drama, but, we didn't want to literally have my actual sister play the character. So, we sort of choose, okay, this detail will be real and this one will be made up, Yeah,
and that's one of the interesting things about the show, since it expanded to True TV, to the half-hour series, is that you get to follow your character more, more in depth. You get a continuous character arc. What was it been like getting to explore both your main character and these other supporting characters in a more detailed way, and sort of weaving that throughout the show?
Well, thanks for asking. That's one of the things that I'm proudest of about the show, that we somehow managed to be both an informational, educational show and a show that tries to tell stories about characters. And I think it comes from my own, insecurity making this show. It's my first show ever. I wanted to throw everything possible into the kitchen sink, to mix metaphors. But I wanted to make it good in every way possible. So yeah, it's got to be informational and a sketch show, and there's got to be character arcs because people are going to want that. And, we gotta make sure this thing, works on every single axis so that we don't get canceled, please, and luckily, the result of that is that we work way too hard, but we make a show that luckily people have responded to. It's been really rewarding. I'm not my first love is always sort of like the information and the straight to camera presentational stuff, I identify more as a stand-up comic than a sitcom writer, but it's been really wonderful to explore those stories and find out, every season I get to sort of ask okay, what insecurity, what issue do I have in my own life that I'd like to sort of explore through this season, So the first one, it's about friendship and Adam has to reckon with death. And then the second, it's, sort of his own feeling of not being situated well within his own family, and feeling a little bit like the black sheep, or feeling that what he has to offer isn't respected by people that he loves, and then this year we're working on in the upcoming season, we're working on more of a relationship story with, we're sort of confronting his existential loneliness. It's been really rewarding to do that. And in the same way, we try to, with Murph and Emily, who are my two, closest collaborators on the show, two of the earliest collaborators, because they're in the earliest short. We really try to write stories that speak to them as people, so they are in real life, a real life married couple, and we talk to them about hey, what do you guys, we're gonna do an episode where you get married. What sort of story should we do? And, they talked about how Emily was well, I was a little ambivalent about getting married. And I know that, Murph was very stressed out by his wedding day, and that ended up, by taking those real details and weaving them into the stories of the characters, it ended up allowing us to tell some really unique, rich stories. That's not the usual storyline you have for a male and female, getting married. So yeah, it's been a real cool space to explore.
And you mentioned some of the heavier topics, dealing with the characters' insecurities, coping with death. What's it been like to balance, to make that balance of the comedy, but not shying away from those certain topics that you can do comedy about, but also there is a heavier component that you sort of confront head on.
Well, I'll say that people ask that, how can you do comedy about such a dark issue? I actually think that doing comedy makes it easier to talk about a dark issue because it gives you those moments of relief, So the tricky part is, making sure, okay, we never want to write a joke that is cruel or, insensitive to the realities of the issue, but, we did a joke, we did an episode where at one point, and this was sort of a turning point for our show, where we go back in time to the Jim Crow South and we talk about voter suppression, and poll taxes and physical intimidation, and that's a very dark issue. I think that's a very dark time in America's history. And how are we going to write a joke off this? Well, we wrote a joke, and it's a joke that respects the seriousness of the issue. It doesn't downplay, it doesn't make it light, doesn't trivialize it, but it's written in a joke format, so it gives you that little moment of lightness while still hitting home what happened, and it makes it and then we also we go back in time with a historian, and then we strand him there, and he's like, oh no, I'm stuck here, which gives you another little moment of lightness. Those moments make it go down easier, it stops the audience from getting so bummed out that they change the channel, so I think it only helps. We do try to we have our episodes. Okay, this is our light episode. This is our little bit heavier episode. This is our we did one on last year we did one on climate change and what a dire situation that is. And we also did one about how, about how award shows work and how they, fake reality TV shows, which is, the tonal opposite, But I think it really, I think that variety is a lot of how we bridge that gap as well.
And some of the topics you do discuss can be very politically dicey or divisive sometimes. Like you mentioned, the voting episode talked about immigration, talked about going green. Has there been any particular subject in terms of feedback or response that you found turned out to be especially controversial, or maybe more controversial than you thought?
Yeah, I mean, there, of course. Let's see, more controversial than we thought specifically. I mean, some we expect to be a little controversial. Like we try to avoid doing topics on the show that are so much the focus of like a national a schism between groups of people that if you bring them up, everyone's going to already know what they think. Like it's the hardest topics for us to be, people say, you just do something about abortion or guns. The moment I start talking about abortion or guns, everybody knows exactly what they think. Their ears are not open, to hearing any sort of new idea. And so we specifically try to avoid those fault lines and do other topics that, will people can be a little bit more open-minded to, and sort of maybe ease our way to some of those more difficult things, Last year we did an episode on immigration, which is one of our first attempts to make a step towards something that's a little bit more, we knew that was a politically relevant idea that year, but we're not the Daily Show, we're not on every day. We knew there'd be a 6-month gap between us writing that and it being on the air. So we just knew, hey, we're going to talk about immigration generally. And our approach was to try to talk about immigration in a way, like try to give the audience information that would change the way anyone would look about immigration, whether or not, you feel, you're in column A about, whether you're on the blue team or the red team. We're going to tell you stuff that is going to make you think about it in a different way. Here's the part of the story that everybody's missing, and so that's why we ended up talking about facts. Hey, border enforcement actually caused the population of permanent undocumented residents to go up. That's what scientists who've done the field research on how many people crossing the border say, or immigration courts. They're so underfunded that there's this incredible backlog of cases, right? That's something that you didn't see any politicians talking about on the debate stage that year, and I think that went pretty well. I'm very, very proud of that episode. That one got a lot of expected blowback from people saying, "Oh, you're not saying exactly what I think already, so I'm mad at you." Blah blah blah. But we also had a lot of people saying, hey, this really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff I didn't know about this. So I'm very proud of it for that reason.
And approaching any given topic, the premise is that you're ruining things for everyone else. But has there ever been a point where you've learned something about a subject as you were researching or preparing an episode, where you sort of ruined something for yourself?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, most of the topics we do on the show are stuff that I knew already, and they're all something that I have some personal interest in. But, we've done, I think our 42nd episode is going to come out this year. And so there's no way I could know all these things myself. So, we have an incredibly talented team of writers and researchers who bring in these topics. And yeah, a lot of times when the topic surprises me, that's when I know it's a good one, So like, honestly, we did a topic about how the female hymen does not work the way you think it works, in our first season. And I was shocked by that. I was like, wait a second, really? I didn't know before the writer brought it up that I had been wrong about that my whole life. I was like, wait, it's not a, I don't need to go into it. But I couldn't believe it. And I wouldn't say it. Actually, it did ruin it for me because I was not aware of the depth of my own ignorance on the topic. A fundamental fact of human anatomy that you would think I'd be familiar with, I was not.
And actually, that was one of the times when you had Emily actually ruin that for your character on the show. Is that where that came from? The fact that you were unaware, and so you wrote it in that way?
That was part of it. It was also just that, look, it was a little weird for a man to do that much, of a segment on a woman's body when she was the recipient of the information. For me to tell a woman, hey, here's what you don't know about your own body, just sort of doesn't track from a comedy or presentational perspective, but yeah, it was also because I actually didn't know that. And, that's why we think it's important to show Adam on the show learn things as well, right? Because it's not that I'm the font of all knowledge, it's that that I know everything and you know nothing, it's that I'm a curious person. I find these things out, right? I ask questions and I want to share what I've learned with you, but part of that is I want to learn as well, that doesn't mean I know I'm always smarter than the other person. I'm just, a little bit more curious. So we thought it was very important to, show that, hey, yeah, Adam is wrong too. He gets taught things as well. Like, he's not a perfect person. That was a very important thing to us. And we've expanded that idea more and more as the show's gone on.
Now, the show rose up in the midst of an election campaign with Donald Trump that turned out to be kind of a fact checker's dream or nightmare, depending on how you look at it. And you did an entire episode focused on the election. But how do you see the role of the show now under this current weird political climate?
Well, we are not able at all to respond to what's going on in the day-to-day news. We started writing our season in December, a month after the election, but before the inauguration, right? And then we shot the first episode of our upcoming season a month. We shot it a month ago, and it's going to premiere this summer, right? So there's no way for our, for us to things are moving so fast. What are we going to say in December that's still going to be relevant the following summer, right? So instead, we're trying to just do our part to continue informing people and encouraging them to ask questions and be critical of what they hear. We think that's a really important basic goal. We're trying to stand up for scholarly sources and responsible for sources of information, and the idea that there is such a thing as truth, and that you can know it and you can find it if you are careful. And there is such a thing as true things and false things. And then, there are a few, just like with immigration last year, I don't want to spoil what they are, but there's a few larger topics that are discussed on our political stage that we, are addressing with our own sort of blend of historical research and looking at it from a new outside view, yeah.
So, with any luck, we will still have a country and, an economy and an infrastructure by the time Adam ruins everything.
We will. Well, that's the thing. A lot of people seem to think, a lot of people are sort of engaged in this end of the world behavior, where they're like, well, we won't even have a country anymore. And that's not true. We will have a country no matter what. We don't know what state it'll be in, but we will have a country. And so we still have a stake in this thing. If you say, oh, we may not even have a country, you let yourself off the hook, but we're going to have one, and it's all of our responsibility to inform ourselves as much as possible so we can participate in that country. So that's what, that's what we try to do on the show anyway.
Well, congratulations on the show up to this point and going into season 2. Looking forward to that. I want to thank you very much for talking with me tonight.
Hey, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.